Are we all systems go?
I think we are. I can see something flashing on a cloud there, so that could be us.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's move forward then. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jo Badillo, and thank you for joining Property Women tonight, where we're going to be interviewing and speaking to Judith Taylor, who,
Yay!
yay, who's going to be telling us what Newcastle has to offer because the secret is out. And I know you've been preaching that secret for quite some time with fantastic success as well, Judith. Just before we begin, I will just go ahead and say that whilst everything you're presenting tonight has come from obviously your integrity, due diligence, all of your research and understanding of the Newcastle market, we always tell members in our community to do their own research as well. So obviously they can engage a buyer's agent to do research, but before you undertake anything, sign a contract, going to doing anything related to finance matters, always seek out, I guess, a professional in that space. So it has to be a licensed, a mortgage broker or a licensed solicitor, a licensed buyer's agent. So it has to be that person who is a professional in that space. So please take on board everything that Judith's teaching you and talking to us about tonight. But of course, always conduct your own due diligence as well when we're going to matters related to property. So, forging ahead past all the boring and the mundane, we're going to be speaking to the wonderful Judith Taylor. Judith has been a long-term property women supporter, actively involved as a team member, going back to 2006 with Property Women. She is a Newcastle specialist buyer's agent, a successful investor. Her background is in property investment education, but also an author, and actively lives and invests in Newcastle and has had some fantastic and very successful transactions for many of her clients in the Newcastle market. And your experience, Judith, I don't even know how many renovations. It makes my hair go grey thinking about the volume of renovations that you have done. Going through DAs and doing that for clients, dealing with town planners, doing all that high level research as well. It's certainly not an easy thing to navigate, and developments as well. So I would love to hand it over to you, Judith, to tell us a little bit more about what's going on in Newcastle.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I probably, after all of that, I don't need to say any more about myself, except I suppose I do what I love and love what I do. So to me, there is no line drawn in the sand between the projects I do for myself and the projects I do for my clients. To me, they're exactly the same. It's just a different person holds the mortgage, whatever. So that's really good. And yeah, I've lost count of the renos as well. I really don't know. Really don't know anymore. And I have actually, from a couple of days ago, I have an interesting bathtub story. You know, a builder wanted to charge an exorbitant price for a bathtub, and I said to him, "Oh, if I couldn't get that bathtub for under $1,000, there's something wrong." And so, in the end, he's actually giving us allowance to remove his bathtub off the job and allowed us to get our own bathtub, which I've managed to get for about $800 instead of his 2,400. So that was just something that I did for a client, just because I don't like to see somebody get ripped off over a bathtub, if that makes sense.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I'm just working out how this thing is working. So what we had on the agenda, if you like, for tonight was to look at the 6 key factors that you look at when you're assessing property. So that doesn't, obviously I've got a Newcastle focus, but really you need to look at these things when you're looking at property, no matter where it is. So I'll go through that. Why is there a focus on Newcastle and why are people liking it? And of course, what's important at the moment is if the market is down or flat, how do you still make money? What things can you do? And strategies that can work in the current market. And I want to go through some recent case studies and projects. It's no good showing people things that happened like 20 years ago or whatever. It's got to be recent things, because otherwise you can't really relate to it. You'd sort of think, oh well, I can't do that now, whatever. So before we go on, I thought I should just briefly discuss the things that are bothering everybody at the moment. So the first one is, of course, borrowing. And that is of serious concern with the way that the banks are at the moment. And so really my response to that is give it your best shot. It's actually, there's a lot of people who actually give up when they see the paperwork and they go, oh, no, well, you know, oh, no, I might as well give up. I wouldn't be able to get a loan. But don't give up. It's a really good time to buy at the moment. So go and see your broker. That's the first most important thing. And I'm an advocate of brokers rather than banks, because the brokers shop around all the banks instead of just one. And the broker knows usually a lot more than just a person sitting at the desk at a bank. And so they'll look for the best deal for you. And even if, as you would have had it happen as well, Joe, if you get rejected, well, you can lie down and cry about that for maybe 24 hours, but then go looking again. See if that bank won't lend to you, or your broker can't get it through that bank. Have a look at what bank will lend to you, because if the deal's worth getting, it's worth persisting with the finance, even if they do ask you things like, how many times did you buy Uber Eats last week? And of course, the other thing is the values sliding, and there's always a bit of nervousness around elections. So we've got that in the background. But I just wanted to show you this little chart that I brought up about how the market has gone down. So can you see that when I put my little mousey thing on there, or not?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, well, if we look, for example, this is just my view of the downturn, if you like, in the market. If we look at Sydney, for example, which it says 9.7% here. Well, I think it did hit 10%, but anyway, somewhere thereabouts. And Newcastle, I had to write that in separately because they never include Newcastle in these figures, was 4%. So Newcastle's gone down 4 and Sydney's gone down 9.7, and you know, nationally we've gone down 5.6, whatever. But for every yin there has to be a yang, and so markets are cyclical, and historically over time properties have grown in value doubled every 7 to 10 years over time, over 160 years since records were being kept. And this thing where things go down, when you've been around a while, you see these things happening and you don't tend to panic as much as the first time you see it. So I remember that happening a number of years ago in Perth, and there was the doom and the gloomers, and it's going to crash and it's going to do this, and this bubble's going to burst, and this, that and the other, because the Perth market had phenomenal growth, which is really what Sydney has just had. But it didn't burst. If you go back and have a look at what happened in Perth, it did go backwards a little bit, and then it plateaued for a while, and then it gradually came up again. So to me, that's what I logically see happening. The other thing that I see as logical is that the banks can't continue, in my opinion, not lending money, because they need us. How do they make money if they don't give us money?
Yeah. I'm hearing that the investment or investor lending is softening a little bit. It's not as difficult as it once was. But you mentioned Uber Eats before. Are you hearing the same thing I am, and that is that your lifestyle behaviour is affecting how you can get loans as well?
Oh, well, it is. I don't think anyone's been asked about Avocado Smash, but they were asked about Uber Eats. So I thought that was rather interesting. And I thought, gee, I wish the questions they asked me were that simple.
Yeah. I've heard that, you know, too many visits to Liquorland, or if they think that you're buying cigarettes and things like that, it's a tough landscape. They take a lot into consideration, whereas, yeah, getting funding, you know, even just, 4 years ago was far easier.
Even 12 months ago was easier.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so it is. And I did think it was important for us to discuss that. But what was the Warren Buffett saying that we were discussing earlier?
To be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful.
Exactly.
So you obviously that like when Sydney went absolutely gangbusters crazy and there was queues out the door. I mean, everyone was in that greed. Oh my God, I've got to get on this bus kind of, I guess, mentality. But, you know, an investor like Warren Buffett would probably be waiting around to get the crumbs now in Sydney and put some lowball offers in, because some vendors are hurting in the marketplace, and that's an opportunity for somebody who has got their finance, and they can, what's that? Making lemonade out of lemons.
Exactly. It's that sort of thing. And you have to turn the sheep-like behaviour around and go, well, you know, how can I do this? How can I do this so that it's you can take advantage of it? And I think that's the bottom line. So we did have to address that. So the focus on Newcastle, it's interesting when you hear local people talk, they get a little bit cheesed off, because for a long time we were seen as Steel City and, you know, whatever, oh, that BHP place, I wouldn't go there. Well, for goodness sake, it's been closed down since 1999, so, you know, it hasn't been around for a while. But people have this sort of old mentality. So for the locals, when finally they realised that investors are really seeing the value in our area, well, it became more of a protective thing of, well, why should we tell them? Like, it's our secret. We want to keep this. We want to keep this ourselves. Well, too late. They know about it. And so we can talk about and I'll be addressing some of these issues as we go, the economy and infrastructure and the entry prices and so on and so forth. But the absolute biggie for Newcastle is the lifestyle. And I find that people that I have that come here as investors, and they end up visiting the place a few times, I'm having people come here to live that didn't live from other places, and those who don't kind of say, oh, gee, I'd really like to, or maybe I could do it later on, or something or other like that. And there is something about there's everything here, and you're doing that on the side of the largest coal exporting harbour in the world, next to the best, or arguably some of the best beaches in the world. You know, we've just had the longboard competition last weekend, and next weekend is Surfest. Well, they're international competitions that they have here every year because of the quality of the beaches, and like water polo championships last weekend, and supercars and all sorts of things like that come to Newcastle because of that lifestyle. In fact, that ship there, that's the Celebrity Solstice. I took that photo from on my roof, actually, of it going up the harbour. I mean, that's just amazing to just see those big things going in and out, and sort of enjoying the lifestyle. And there's a lot more tourism too, I've noticed.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's one thing as a a Sydney-based local, and for those who are on the webinar and not familiar with the geographic logistics, an hour and a half from the northern beaches of Sydney through to Newcastle is the commute. But you make some really valid points in terms of lifestyle and what it offers. And I think even as a tourist destination, it's not a secret by any measure, but people in Sydney, they go to the Hunter Valley where there's wine tasting and things like that. But Newcastle, the harbour is just, the beaches are beautiful, and you get really good coffee. I know that's a massive draw card for me. So
coffee's not bad. Yeah, so back to, well, you can tell I'm a bit biased, and I do love Newcastle, and I've always loved Newcastle, and I've never invested anywhere else. Of all the places that I've been, where I've done property tours of all sorts of places, interestingly for me, I've only ever bought property here, so I am a little bit biased. So we're going to look at the key factors: the location, economy, industry, employment, infrastructure, and affordability. So we'll have a bit of a look at those one at a time. And so in terms of location, I think you mentioned it before, it's Australia's 7th largest city, second largest city in New South Wales, the largest coal exporting harbour in the world, and 2 hours from Sydney. And interestingly, in that photo there, oh, you might be able to see it if I point, that's actually my house there. That's how close I am to the beaches and the harbour, which is just so exciting and wonderful to live here. I've been here for 2.5 years. And I used to pinch myself, because how could someone who was a single mum and all that end up living in what I consider to be the best place in the world? And it's through property. That's the answer, you know, so that's pretty interesting. So the economy, the Hunter has Australia's largest regional economy. The gross regional product is bordering on 48 billion. And there's quite a diversified economy, and that's something to keep in mind. Remember when everyone was investing in mining towns? I always use that as an example, because that's what I call a one industry town. And it's almost like share trading or something. When you take something on that only has one industry in the town, something only has to happen to that industry, and you're gone. You've lost your investment. I remember a number of years ago there was a mine in New Zealand that caved in, and the miners were killed and trapped in there and whatever. Was it the Pike mine? Is that what it was? I think that was the name of it. And anyway, the whole town closed down. So anyone who had investments in that area didn't do very well at all. So say again.
What was the year that happened?
Oh, how would I remember? Probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, it wasn't too long. Okay, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It was on the North Island, and it just closed the whole place down.
Wow.
And a terrible tragedy and whatever. So the health is the number one in the Hunter. We've got the John Hunter, which is a teaching hospital. The Calvary Mater Hospital is a major oncology hospital outside of Sydney for the New South Wales area. And Hunter Medical Research Institute. When you hear of things that have been invented or breakthroughs in health or whatever, 9 times out of 10, the tag Hunter Medical Research Institute is on the end of it. So it's really, really big in the area. Restaurants and catering. It is amazing how many wine bars and unusual food type items, all the really incredible vegan things and Brazilian food and Vietnamese and you name it, it's everything. So very interesting to see that diversity moving in, and coffee shops on every corner and so on and so forth. And the other thing that is really big is education. So when we look at the top employment or top industries, health, professional, education, there's 24,000 students at Newcastle University and 6,000 staff. The campus that opened in the CBD is the first of its kind in the world. It's a flexible learning centre and it houses 3,000 students. But they also have more land that was... the land came as a donation from someone who had attended Newcastle Uni from one of the Asian countries, and he donated enough money to the uni for them to buy extra land in town. And so I saw the plans the other day of what is proposed for even more extensions of the uni. So education is really quite big. And then when we look at employment, so if we look at I picked up the most recent figures that I could get. So if you look at the New South Wales average, the Hunter region is higher than the New South Wales rate.
this thing, participation rate, that's to do with people who are actively trying to look for work. And so it looks like, if you were to interpret that, that it would appear that they're trying harder than the rest of New South Wales. But it's also interesting to look at the annual employment growth is on 4%, where the rest of the New South Wales is on 3.5. And to also look at the population growth, there's some steady growth there as well. And again, when you do your research, you tend to get different figures, because that's showing the population of 442, but then there was something else on the Australia ABS which puts the population at over 500. So it depends exactly on when they do their statistics is the problem. So as investors, you look at it generally and you take from that, you know, is it generally looking good, or is it generally looking bad?
Yeah.
In terms of making your decisions. So in terms of infrastructure, massive upgrades to the coal loading terminal, the airport. It is just amazing to live in a city where you can get to the airport in 20 minutes.
Yeah, also.
And actually, the last time I was at the airport, I thought, oh, just for a change, I'm going to try catching the bus home from the airport. And I think it cost, $3 something to get back on the bus. I thought that was rather amazing.
See, this is why there's so much migration out of Sydney. Just going from the city circle into the airport is like a $10 or $15 extra fee, obviously just to fund the infrastructure. But yeah, it's $7 something for half an hour's park. You know, it's just it's difficult, and I mean, you do sometimes wonder why. You know, why do we endure this? The traffic's mayhem.
Well, exactly.
We've actually had a question. Are people able to commute to work to Sydney from Newcastle? Do people do that with the roads?
Sorry, say that.
Do people commute from Newcastle to Sydney for work?
Yes. I actually have a guy staying at my place called John the Lodger, because he's been here so long, I had to give him a name. A lovely man called John. And he owns a place in Newcastle and has been living in Sydney for quite a few years. And so he has a tenant in his house up here. And when he got a job in Newcastle, the tenant's lease had not expired. So he needed somewhere to come to Newcastle 3 or 4 nights a week, whatever, which is what he does. Very soon his tenant is leaving. And so he commutes up, catches the train on a Monday, goes to work, comes here on Monday night, and then he leaves to go home on Thursday or Friday, or sometimes his wife might come up, or sometimes they might stay for the weekend, or something or rather like that. But that's how he does it. And people do commute. And I will get to the train in just a moment. We've recently put in a new interchange, and in fact, that in that photo, you can actually, that zigzag roof that you can see there is the roof of the interchange. So a couple of years ago, the heavy rail line in Newcastle closed, and there was a bit of controversy over that. A lot of people didn't like it, whatever, but it's too late if they don't like it. A new interchange was built at Wickham Station, which is now called Newcastle Interchange, which, I was talking about the airport bus and whatever, that comes to the interchange. The trains from Sydney come to the interchange. And as of last Sunday, that's our new light rail which opened Sunday. So that was a very exciting day. I decided to ride the tram on the very first day, because I thought, well, really, that's Newcastle's version of being able to say you were on the Harbour Bridge the day it opened. I was on the tram the day it opened. And they were expecting between 5,000 and 10,000 people to turn up to try out the tram, but in fact 15,000 turned up. So it was just a little bit sardine-ish in these trams. It was an amazing day. At every tram stop, they had all sorts of entertainment and things that you could do for free and things for kids and all that sort of thing. So it was really really well embraced, I would think, with all of those people that I saw. So that's how that now works. So you get the train to the interchange, and then you get the tram, and the last stop is called Newcastle Beach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So all good. So in terms of affordability, the median price of Newcastle is about half that of Sydney.
Yeah.
So I don't need to say much more about that. In terms of vacancy rates, I took a sample from the Terry Ryder report here. I thought I'll take a fair sample. Now you'll see that that Lambton North Lambton statistic is sitting there fairly high, and I can tell you the reason for that is that the North Lambton area also includes a lot of student accommodation, and the suburbs that have student accommodation, the statistics on them is a bit skewed because student accommodation includes all of those rent by the rooms, and so you tend to have those sitting around because there's some various rooms to rent that you wouldn't want to rent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's an overabundance of not so good rooms to rent. So in fact, I don't even, that's another thing you actually have to look at, because I don't really like buying in student suburbs, because I tend to think there is an oversupply, and there's an indication of it, and you don't get the growth in purely student suburbs as you do in family suburbs. So that's another reason to, so you need to look at these sort of things and gather your information as you're going.
Yeah.
So
and really also, I think as a local, you know, those pockets that are more skewed to student housing. Like, I've been, obviously personally, I wouldn't want to be in that space, but you know, like it's, you know, if I guess you've got a client that's an investor and looking for strong yield, then maybe that's where they do turn their attention to. But everyone's strategy is different, I guess.
Well, everyone's strategy is different. But if you're wanting, you know, if you've got X amount of dollars to spend and you want long-term growth, there are suburbs you could choose that are better than the ones really close to the uni, if that kind of makes sense. But it doesn't mean you can't have students in those houses. It just means they're not close to the uni. So you can make it work so that you increase the yield. But yeah, and also you can have a suburb, it's all called the same suburb, but one street might be better than another street, or one half of the suburb might be better than the other half, or something like that.
Yeah, sure. Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So looking at strategies that work in the current market, we're looking at the things like, somebody's just come in my door. I'll have to tell them to be quiet in a minute. We have the renovations, granny flats, subdivisions, obtaining a DA. So selling something with DA approval is something that we can look at. Dual locks and developments. But the thing is that when you're looking at a project, you have to look at something that actually suits the person. So we talked a bit before about finance. So you've got to look at the budget, what your budget is, which means how much your broker will get you from the bank, really. And then you look at your strategy. So do you need to do something to turn over to gain some cash? Do you want to hold it for long term? Do you want something in a staged project? And it also has to fit with who you are. It's no good sort of getting involved in a renovation where you have to choose the colour of the paint when you hate doing that sort of thing, or that you get a development when you don't want to do a development, or whatever. Or it may be that because to renovate, you don't actually have to hold the tools or whatever. You know, it also depends on the extent of the renovation. There's big renos and little renos. Sometimes it's just call in somebody to do a bit of painting, somebody to change the carpet, and you're ready to go. So it could be something like that, but it just depends on how much you want to be involved in the actual project. So I thought I'd show you a few examples of some things that people are doing currently. So this is a project of Trish's, and it just settled last month. But we picked up this little beauty for $370,000 in a suburb where the median price is $505,750. And this is a lady who is very capable of doing renovations. She's done 8 in the past, and she's amazing. She's got great ideas, and she's one of those people who knows what looks good with things. So when the property is finished, she'll be able to dress it up and make it look good, and she's just got great ideas, and she's a great bargain shopper. And the picture of the little bus there is because, of course, we will be talking a little bit later about the bus tour we're going to do of Newcastle, and we'll be going past on the bus. Hopefully we'll be able to go in the house and have a look at it when we're on the bus tour, which will be really
awesome.
I know, that's very exciting. So just as an example of what she's done, or one of the things that she's done, is you can see it's pretty ratty on the outside in the left-hand picture. She had it rendered, so the cost of the render and the paint was $8,500. So she hasn't finished this is the photo on the day that was done. So the windows have to be painted and the brickwork around here has to be painted. But what an awesome difference that she's made just to the external facade of the house.
Yeah, amazing. It looks so much more modern just with the colour, doesn't it?
Well, she's just good with things like that. She knows the colours that are good, and it's going to be absolutely amazing by the time she's finished. She's in there, you know, she's knocked out a few walls and rejigging things around, and that one's going to be on sold. So it will be, and this is in the face of people saying, well, you can't on sell in this market. Well, you know, I can't give you the proof yet because it hasn't happened, but that is the aim of what's going to happen there. And that's almost back to that line of Warren Buffett's, you know, while everybody else is fearful of doing it, Trish is out there doing it, which is quite amazing.
She bought obviously way below market cost too, which obviously helps with what she does. And that's obviously part of the smarter strategy when you're doing flipping in that market.
Oh, well, I looked at, this was the 4th house that I looked at for her. The other 3 ended up the other 3 happened to be at auction, and they all went too much for what we were prepared to pay. It's make your money when you buy. So it had to be at the right price. And actually I bought this one for her without her having seen it. And so when she came up to have a look at it, she was very excited. She said that was the first house that she'd ever bought to renovate that didn't stink.
Oh, yuck.
So that was good. And she's doing this as a little fill-in project because she's waiting to do a dual lot development on her other property. And this is just something to do while she's getting quotes from builders and things like that. So she's on the move all the time, this lady. So it's just amazing to see. So watch this space to see what happens with that one. And, this is an example of a granny flat. Now you can see the front house and there's the granny flat being built at the back. And I just wanted to give you an idea of the basics of a granny flat. Very roughly, you can say that a granny flat costs around about $130,000, and the rent that you will get from a granny is around the $340 to $350. So that's a really great strategy for increasing your yield, and of course it makes you look better with the bank because the more rent you've got coming in, the better it adds to your serviceability. So that's That's a good thing as well. That will be one of the things we'll be looking at on not this particular one, but we will be looking at granny flats on the bus trip. But something interesting about this one is that's the little house at the front. It's a 2-bedder, and that's the granny at the back, and it's it's good. The slide is covered up. The rent is what is that? $655 a week for the two. And the interesting thing is, so that I had the figures correct, I rang the property manager, and he said, oh, it could do with some landscaping. I said, yes, I've had a look at the aerial shots of it, and as you can see around the granny flat, it's just grass and whatever. So he gave me a comment. My guy did it on a budget, and this is the thing about your budget. You can do things on your budget, and then later on, when you've got a little bit of cash, you can do a bit more. And he said that if the landscaping was improved with a better parking space for the front house and give them a garden shed each, that it would actually increase the rent to about $720 a week.
That's significant, isn't it?
So isn't that, there's always things you can do when you look at what you've got.
Yeah, just better. See, things like, I mean, some of the landscaping, obviously it can be a very expensive exercise, but I imagine just for a granny flat, you know, the simplicity of having just garden shed and you know, a carport or something that makes it more homely.
Exactly.
That's a big jump.
Yep. So that's quite an amazing difference, I thought. So definitely worth, that's how you can increase your yield on something that you've already got, is just do some sort of improvement for the tenant. And another one is to obtain a DA. So this little house, Ty had it for a while. He'd had it since 2013, and he got the DA approval on it. It's just a little house in the middle that needed knocking down, and he had approval to do 4 townhouses in the format of two duplexes. And it was during last year that he looked at the finance on it, and he could get the finance to build the 4, but it was going to be so tight and so hard for him that he was just about crippled doing it. And he said to me, well, you know, what if I sold it? And I'm a great lover of holding things rather than selling them. And I said, oh, you know, I don't know. But I said, look, I'll put you onto an agent who have a talk to him and just see what he thinks. And so he did. And in fact, the agent had a list of people interested in these sort of properties, and he had it sold in a week, which was interesting, for $550,000. And interestingly enough, a couple of days later, I went and bought him another property that we'd been looking at an auction, and I haven't included the details of it here, but he's working on it at the moment. It's going to be a stage development, which will be so much easier for him to deal with. He'll be able to do a subdivision on the block with a house at the back, and then the block at the front, he'll be able to do another house and then subdivide. But by doing one at a time makes it much more affordable for him. So it's not often you see deals like that, but that was just the perfect one for him, where this one would have caused him more difficulty trying to, it was a good project, but it would have caused him possibly financial hardship. It was borderline for him.
Yeah, I understand.
And this is a very interesting one. I purchased this property for a client. It never went on the open market. It was a private sale. So as you can see, it's on 2 lots, and it was 511 square metres. And we were getting all the concept plans and everything ready for the. What happened there?
You've gone one back, I think.
Yeah, I've gone one back. Okay. We were getting plans done to do 3 townhouses on it. And there was one thing that was going to cause us a bit of grief with these townhouses, because that's not very much land to fit 3 on. And there was this big whopping, doesn't look like a Norfolk Island pine there, but that's what it was. And so lo and behold, we got an arborist who wrote us this really good report that said that the tree was on its last legs and ready to kill somebody and whatever. And the council actually allowed us to remove it, which was just incredible. So we removed the tree, and he had the concept plans and whatever, and then he was going to go ahead and do the build. But to do the build, he had to sell his property in Sydney, and that was at the time when the Sydney market was experiencing a bit of problem and he wasn't able to sell. So he thought, oh, well, I wonder if I could just on-sell the project. So he did, and look at the difference in the price.
That's May to July.
Yep.
Oh.
And seriously, all we did
375.
Yep. And all we did was remove this tree, and these at the same time removed a few shrubs up the back.
Do you know, and if you're able to share, like the arborist costs? I mean, if it was a big Norfolk pine, it might be what, 5,000 or something.
Oh no, it was about. I think the arborist. I could look it up, but the arborist report was maybe about $300. And I have a good tree removal guy. He's called the Ninja, and I think it was about $2,000 for the tree.
Oh, wow,
something like that. So it was quite amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
You know what? For 3 months' work, I would do that every year.
I'd love to do one every year.
Not a bad deal at all.
Absolutely, he did extremely well. So then we have a dual lock, and this is one that I'm actually working on at the moment. So this is the house at the front, and this is the architect's sketch of the dwelling. So it's a house that's going down the back, and you can see this driveway going down the side. So the house is going down here, and you can see the lot's being cleared, ready to go. And I'm actually project managing this one for Vicky. And I have a couple of, we'll go past on the bus tour and have a look at this one, of course, because it will still be being built. We're on a 22-week contract and we're 2 weeks in. So the first thing that had to happen was the diggers come in, and there were big infiltration trenches and things at the back. So that all had to be done, and they dig out for the slab. And so it was a very exciting day on Friday when the slab got poured, because it was supposed to get poured Wednesday and it rained. So I was much relieved when it actually happened on Friday. It's just, you hold your breath when you're waiting for a slab, because you just don't want it filling up with water or whatever. So it's good to see that come out of the ground. So that was on Friday. And yesterday, the truck arrived out the front with all this framework and whatever. And see this crane here on the side? That's the crane coming down that driveway.
Yeah, right.
With all the framework and so on. So it's very, very exciting. And that's actually the job with the bathtub that we ended up getting a freestanding bathtub. So all good. And this is okay. This one is actually a live deal. This one's on the market at the moment. It's a 506 metre block of land, and it is really, really close to a really popular shopping centre. It's in an excellent location. There's nothing wrong with the house. I've checked out the house. I've got photos and everything of the house. I've had a planner check it, and we would be able to get 3 townhouses on it. The price guide for this property is around about the 600. The guide is 585 to 625, and the median suburb price here is 718,000, but if you were to build 3 new units, so in other words, with this one, you would need to remove the house, demolish the house, and put 3 new units on there, and those units would be worth 650,000 each. It's actually a really good project. So even for someone who doesn't have the buying capabilities or the borrowing capability to build 3 townhouses, the house is quite a solid house. You could sit on it and rent it for now, and just sit on it, or you could get a DA done on it and then on-sell the house with the DA, or you just sit on it until you can afford to do the build yourself. So that one's a really good one.
Awesome.
And this is another one that's actually on the market at the moment. Now, that other one I just showed you is in a really upper end of the market, and this particular one is more the lower end of the market, but it's in an area that I actually watch that is gentrifying, and there's some good infrastructure going in around it. So I actually watch this particular suburb, or there's 2 or 3 suburbs around this that I watch, and I think this one is quite good because, as you can see, the house itself is on two lots, but the house is not on one or the other. It's right in the middle. And the amazing thing about this is the asking price. I watched this one for several months actually, and I tried to do the numbers on it when it first came on the market, and they had unrealistic expectations, and I couldn't make the numbers work. And obviously they've had to be conditioned that no one would buy it at that price. So they've reduced it down to what I consider is a really good price. And so the strategy with this one, as far as I'm concerned, is that you would do what I call a slider, and you would get a house remover to slide that house over onto one block. I've actually measured it and it would fit. And then you would renovate it after you've moved it. So you could, for now, just rent it for now and then do all of this other stuff later. But you move it over and renovate it, and what that actually leaves you with, because it's on 2 lots, you don't have any cost to subdivide. It's immediately a house on one lot and a vacant block on the other. And so you could sell that house if you wanted to, and then that would help to fund you to build a new house on the other block, or you could sell the block and keep the house, or you could keep both. You could have it revalued because it would be worth more as 2 blocks, and then you suck the equity out of the house you've moved across, and that possibly would give you the funds you need to build your new house, something like that. And then you could keep them or sell them or whatever you wanted to do.
Sure. Just a quick question we've had is, what would the cost be to slide the house approximately?
Yes, about 20.
Okay.
Because
would that be not including services?
Sorry?
Oh, so would that be including your services?
Yep, your services, and you have to have it repaired. But then the house needs renovating anyway.
Yeah.
So you then renovate the house. But you're not going to have those issues that you have when a house is put on a truck and carried to another suburb because they get all jiggled around and whatever.
Yeah.
It's just slide it a couple of meters, 2 or 3 meters.
Sure. I mean, what's so wonderful about that as an option, as an investor in that market, it is like a set and forget purchase for now, but you've got exit strategies, you've got options, you've got do the paperwork and unsell it, do it yourself. There's just so many different avenues, I think, as opposed to just a house on a block.
Absolutely. Oh, it's just amazing having those 2 lots. Yeah, once you've got 2 lots and you can get that house onto it, you've instantly got the value of an extra block of land. So yeah, very interesting, that one. And I just threw this one. This was one that it's just another interesting strategy. These people live in Sydney, and they wanted something really cute that was near the wineries, with the idea that they want to come up here as an escape from Sydney, But interestingly enough, we settled it, only about 3 weeks ago, something or other like that. And they bought all of their furniture online and brought it up with a truck and whatever. So within 2 or 3 days, they had the place all furnished and whatever, put it on Airbnb, and 3 or 4 days later, they had their first booking for Airbnb. So they can use it for both, for themselves and for an Airbnb.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that just awesome? It's a very cute little house too.
I like the idea of that. And I think Airbnb is a good one for that formula. You know, if you did want I want to use it when I want to use it, but when I'm not using it, Airbnb can be a really strong return for you.
Absolutely. And it's also that thing, I guess, of me being able to guide people, because when I first started talking to them and they told me, you know, they'd been looking and they'd missed out on a few, and I said, well, show me what they were and give me the addresses and I'll check it out. And because they were from Sydney, they weren't selecting the same sort of areas that I would select for them, if that makes sense. So in the end, I was checking things like, well, because they're not going to be there, what area is going to have better rainfall so that their grass stays nice and green. They were looking in areas that were really dry. And this one is near the general store that sells everything. And I thought, well, if I'm checking it out, I have to go out and check the coffee. I can't let them buy a house unless the coffee's good. So I did all of that, and and then I found out all about the bus that takes people $20 return. It will take the people to the wineries and bring them back, so that if they want to get inebriated, they don't have to take their car, and it gives them the guided tour for the $20. So, you know, it's all really good. It's really nice for them. They'll be able to really do well out of it, and they're expecting their first baby, and so it's just going to be lovely for them.
Really good.
Yeah, all good. And so the thing about using a buyer's agent, and I think we talked about that, it's that local knowledge is the thing, and working with people to find the thing that is going to work for them, and two heads are better than one. And you know this, Jo, from doing this with people, that when you can share your ideas and really draw out what it is that's going to work for someone, and instead of finding them something average, find them something amazing, is the way that it needs to go in my view. And taking the drama out of doing the negotiation and the auction, and if people need help with DAs and renos and developments like that one that I'm doing the development over there at Mayfield, Vicky couldn't do that herself because she lives overseas, and so it would be way too complex. You know, it's I'm able to send her different photos of what the colours are, because she can't quite tell from the colour charts and this and that and the other, and so I can find her examples of things that are painted in the colour she's thinking of, so that I can show her what it looks like and things like that, which is all really good. And it's that contact with the local community, that thing of knowing the difference between what's a good property and what's a bad property, and all of those sorts of things that you just instantly know.
Well, it's local area expertise and knowledge, and I think people you can underestimate the power of leveraging off the contacts that a local person has if there is work that needs to be done, like from a carpenter to just a sparky or someone who's doing a guest and building report. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the sort of thing that we're going to be looking at on the bus. You know, the thing about why is one suburb different to another, and why is this house different to that one, and what's the opportunity with this property? Trying to look at a property and saying, well, okay, if you had this property, what would you do with it? What do you think you could do? What's the highest and best use of it? And so we look at, on the bus tours, we look at different examples, and we have it set out so that there's some feasibility on it to see what the costs are going to be, what the development is going to cost, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how you got there, see with your own eyes how to spot a diamond from a dud. But
Yeah, it is.
because
You learn that stuff
yes,
see when you see these sort of things. That is what you learn to see. You can't get that out of a book.
no, I know. You know what I love is that because now I've been on, I suppose, the last 6, 7 bus tours, that when I go back, you're taking me to spots where you go, do you remember this old shack? Now look at the 3 townhouses or the, like it's fun to sort of see the progress because we only do this once or twice a year. And obviously there's been demand to have it from October to March because people are saying, oh, you've got to do another one early next year, which is the reason we've introduced the March 30 date. But I love seeing that progression. Like it's really good fun for me to come back and go, oh, yeah, I remember. So,
Well, I think it's also a good mixture of, we might drive past somebody's place and say, oh, well, that was so-and-so and they bought that and this is what they did with it. But then we can go and see, for example, we talked about Trish doing the reno. Well, we'll actually go through the house and see it. And I threw a couple of extra things in here because there were a couple of things on the bus tour that we did in October that, because I try and include some live deals, which isn't necessarily an easy thing to do because they have to fit the criteria of things that we would be interested in. But on the last bus tour, I don't know, they just happened to be there, and there were these couple of good things. And interestingly enough, Liz bought one of them. Do you remember that one, Jo?
Yeah. No, I do actually. This property, like it was just so right for, I guess, renovation. I remember going through it, but it had good, strong bones about it.
Well, it did. And the one thing that stands out for me is that we walked in the door and the agent was wanting everybody to sign the book. And I just said, oh, they're with me.
A whole busload of people show up.
He started to get excited for a minute.
Yeah.
So yes, a cute little house. It needs some reno. And interestingly, Liz wouldn't probably mind me saying that she's done developments in the past, but she hasn't done renos. But anyway, I've introduced her to Paul, who does the work that she will require. So what she's done is she's done some very basic, if you like, repairs on the house just to get a tenant in there, and it didn't even replace the carpet, just tried to clean the best we could with what we had. Like the carpet's about 100 years old by the look of it. And the idea will be, and this is the concept plan for the new house. So she's got plans underway or in the DA process. So I'm trying to point with my finger. The house will go here, and then the parking spot for that house will go there. And then she's done the minimal to the front house for now. She'll build the new house, and then that's the point at which she will do the proper full reno on the front house, because had she have done it now, it gets wear and tear from the tenant. Whereas if she does it afterwards, after this new build, then it will be a new reno and nicer for selling. So even in that, she was a little bit apprehensive about the reno idea, but she now realises that there's actually nothing to it, which is really, really good. She doesn't have to be involved, or she doesn't have to be here or anything like that for it to happen. The same with the build process. It can all be done. She lives in Sydney, so it will be done from a distance. So we'll go past and have a look at how that one's going when we do the bus tour. And then this is one that I think would be really good for everyone to come and see. This is Charlie and Samuel. They bought this house. Are you able to see, are our photos over the top of the photo of the house there? Can I move it across?
Looks clear.
Oh, no, I've done something. Okay, just leave it as it is. But, you know, an interesting house there, and that's it there. So they're doing a couple of things. One is they're doing a major renovation on this house. So this is going to be very exciting to see. And Samuel was absolutely in his glory when he heard that he could smash down walls. He really got excited. And so they've ripped out the walls. They're changing the floor plan. They're adding an extra bathroom, moving the kitchen, all sorts of things. The house is going to be absolutely beautiful. But what actually happened was that we got an amazing deal on this house. It's almost the same as the house 3 doors down that had sold for $90,000 more than our house. But it was a bit of a property that had issues with family to do with the deceased estate, and the family kept jeopardising the chances of selling it by doing strange things at auctions and things like that. And so by the time we were on the scene, the agent was over it, the public trustee was over it, the Salvation Army, who were the solicitors, were over it. And so we just kept making low offers until they, and everybody ran away because of some sort of family interactions and so on. And so the fact that we bought it for $90,000 less than the one down the street, and the one down the street they renovated as well. And I went down to the one down the street, and while the builders, I shouldn't say this publicly, should I? Anyway.
I'm curious what you're going to say.
No, it's not that bad. I asked them, could I have a look in the house? And they said, oh, no, you're not allowed to look in. And I said, oh, all right, then I'll just walk around the outside if you don't mind. And they were all sitting at the front eating their lunch. So I snuck in the back door when they didn't see what I was doing. So that was all right. So I got to have a look. And definitely we got even though we paid $90,000 less, we got the better house. Yeah. So that's interesting. So when you buy something that much cheaper, and well-renovated houses in this suburb bring a really good price, it means that spending that sort of money on the renovation, it's a quality home in a quality area. That's what you've got to watch for with these things. You've got to watch that you don't overcapitalise or whatever. The other thing they're doing is they're going to put a granny flat in the backyard, and it will be a really nicely placed granny flat. This front house is going to have its own carport, and you'll drive straight into the carport of the other one, and everyone's going to have plenty of room. The back one will have privacy, and it will be a really well organised granny flat. So it's in a really good location, good suburb, a really good property. So we'll go and check that one on the bus.
That's awesome. Do you think that Charlie and Samuel might show us some of their plans also for the granny? Because it'd be nice to see that.
Absolutely. Yes, they certainly will. And they'll be more than happy for everyone to come through and have a look. In fact, they're very excited about it.
Yeah. Oh, good. That's excellent. So I love the real case studies, the real stories. Like every time, Judith, you've always put together a really action-packed day. So I've had a question come to me just now. Actually, if anyone has got questions, you can put that in the chat. You can put it privately just by selecting all panelists, or you can make it public by doing it to all panelists and attendees. So feel free to ask Judith or any questions through this format. But someone asked if men can come, and every time we get asked that question, and every time we have for sure at least 2-3 guys. Sometimes we've had a couple more, but understanding that, your co-investor or partner is male and they want to enjoy and understand, I guess, the day out, because it's a really fun day, the bus trip. I think people underestimate that property. I mean, I've always thought it has been really fun, and everyone who comes on board is always, I think, pretty amazed by how action-packed it is, the people we speak to, how much they learn. The bus leaves from Newcastle at 8:30 a.m. in a street where there's plenty of street parking, but also a secure car park outside a cafe. And we're back there at 4 p.m. But Judith, we always wind up talking for another hour or so on the
Oh,
So
well,
I
it's sort
agree.
of that excitement thing. And I must say, when the men come along, they enjoy it just as much. It doesn't make any difference. I think the women in particular really love the hands-on approach, you know, to be able to walk into a reno and run your hands over the walls, or find some open for inspections on the day and go and have a look at them. It's so much fun to turn, like that one saying, oh, well, you know, are you all going to sign the book? No, we're all together, you know, that sort of thing. I did tell him we were going. I wouldn't just take a busload of people without telling them. And yeah, you know, it creates the different stages, because you're looking at things that are for sale and saying, well, okay, this is for sale. Is it worth buying? Let's have a look at that. And then you're looking at actual projects that are being done. And then we're driving past projects that have been done. And then we're driving past projects that are about to be done, that sort of thing. So they're all at different stages, and it gives that insight of how it's something like seeing, feeling, touching, or something like that you can't, unless you're there, you can't describe to somebody what it's like. But it really is that thing that imprints on you by being there.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, even if people were not in the position to invest now, or even Newcastle wasn't on their radar, I think what the value is seeing the multitude of strategies that people can do as well. Because I guess what Newcastle Council is very, well, I mean, I might be a bit generous by saying easy to deal with, but compared to a lot of the councils that I deal with, especially in the Sydney market, they do seem, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do seem to be a bit more flexible in what the opportunities are.
Well, they encourage multiple developments and increased density, because we actually have a need for property, and we're landlocked. You know, there's no more of this inner city land. You can get things out in the bushy type suburbs, whatever, but the more desirable stuff is in limited supply, and the council are good. But I should just clarify that by saying they're also, they won't let you get away with anything. So you really need to have very good planners, very good town planners. You have to have every T crossed and every I dotted before you put your plans in. And if you do, you'll have a pretty smooth ride.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing with that, I think. And also, you raised a bit of a point there, that when you're looking at these strategies, it doesn't, I know I'm focused on Newcastle, but the strategies can be anywhere. Once you get the idea of how it actually looks to do a development or a granny flat or a renovation or a dual lock or whatever, you can find those, every area is a little bit different, but the basics are the same no matter where you wanted to apply it. And just as a little aside, where the idea from these bus trips came from was that years ago, when I was working with Jeff and Paul, the Reno Kings, and I used to fly up there for the events on the Monday morning when everybody else was recovering. Jeff and I used to have what was called breakfast meetings. And so we'd have breakfast for about an hour or two, and then he'd run me to the airport. And on this particular occasion, he said, oh, you know, when was your flight and whatever? And he said, would you, well, to fill in a bit of time, would you like to come and have a look at one or two of my properties? And I said, oh, would I? That would be just so fantastic. So anyway, when we'd finished and I came home, and I had a taxi driver or something pick me up from the airport, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I had the most wonderful day of my life. I said, driving around looking at properties. And he said, gee, you mustn't have much of a life.
Oh.
But see, he's the taxi driver, you know, so put it into perspective. So I rang Jeff the next day and told him how just amazing it was, and I'd never experienced anything so wonderful. And he said, oh, really? He said, well, if you really enjoyed it that much and you're one person in a car, what if we got people in a bus? And took them around and showed them all these different strategies. And I said, well, if they were half as excited as me, they'd probably enjoy it. And so that's where it actually started. It was the Reno Kings that started the bus trip idea. And so people used to fly in from Melbourne or Sydney or wherever it was to drive around and look at the properties in Brisbane and take home the ideas from that.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to invest in Brisbane, obviously for me, I came home and put the ideas that I learned into Newcastle properties. And by doing that, see it, feel it, touch it, you can learn more in one day than you can learn months of going to seminars or reading books, because it's physical.
Yeah, and I think it's also speaking to the person who's doing the work. That's been really valuable. You actually get to meet the person who owns the property or is doing the renovation. And like you said, it's far more, it's hands-on. And so just to give you an idea, the day, you pretty much, you're on the bus, you've got the workbook, all food, refreshments catered for, a couple of surprise giveaways throughout the day. Judith, always, given that it's property, and sometimes, we might have something we want to show you, but it happens to sell that week. Sometimes we don't exactly know until the 11th hour all the properties that we're going to, but we've never had a shortage of them, that's for sure. And we already know in advance now that we're doing a few live case studies of the renovation, which I know are fantastic. And you'll also take us past some of those DA ones that you've shown me in the past where, clients have bought a block and on-sold it. I find it really interesting to see those finished products.
Yep, that's not a problem. We'll be seeing all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, excellent.
Not everybody can afford to do a development, and there's other things you can do, as in the DAs or the on-selling or a JV or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's where people lose that side of builders want to come in and build. They don't really want to hold something while the DA is being done. But if you're buying, have a tenant there and you're getting that DA process done and you sell it at the end, I mean, it's moving paperwork. It's not a bad option for someone who's not wanting to go down that development path.
Exactly. Yeah, no, there's plenty of options, and as I said before, you've got to fit it with who you are. Find something that works. It's your personality.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Sounds very good. I would love everyone to join us. We're about probably just over 50% capacity on the bus. It's March 30th. I've just put the link to the tour in our chat here as well for the webinar. You can also find it at Property Women's website as well as our Facebook group. And I've also provided you with a code for a 10% discount if you wanted to jump on board. Strongly recommend that you do, because it is just so much value. And what I always notice is that every year we get people coming back who came the year before, which is always kind of cool.
That's interesting.
Because I guess they know it's not going to be repetitious. It's going to be a whole bunch of new stuff, or what they did see, they get to see the finished product. So that's always good fun too. Judith Taylor, as always, awesome information, very generous in sharing that knowledge with Property Women. Really appreciate your time, and to all our attendees as well, thank you. A couple of people did have to leave, so they've asked if I could send a recording out, which I will do as well, so you'll be able to share that with anybody else if you're sort of a little bit on the fence. Thank you. We just got a couple of thank yous coming through as well, so thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. It's always such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Now, because you're the host, I've passed on those controls to you. You've got to press the stop record button on your end. That way we'll get a recording up into the cloud and I'll be able to send it out to everybody. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.